Thanks for watching the video. This is Pascal for EMP Reviews. This is the final part of our review of Inception. Again, I want to thank Art Medina for doing this review with me. Okay, so then, this was kind of, it's either a plot problem or it shows the codependence of Dominic, which is the fact that after saying to Mal, I can't trust you anymore, he tells her, sit here. And then it's like, you can't trust her, why would you do that? You know?
Exactly.
And she gets up and he almost falls down and everything, you know. So
I almost feel like most of his, because you know, throughout the movie, there's a few moments where the Ellen Page character finds him by himself, sort of deep diving into his own memories, right?
Yeah.
And then finally she like looks to see what it, and it seems that he has hung out with his wife in these memories, in these dreams, so much that it's his addiction. He's basically saying, I can't let go of her.
Yeah.
And so every time that he jumps into somebody else's consciousness, she has to pop up because he's thinking of her.
Well, the limbo stuff, that's all his own mind.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, what happens is that I think that because he deals with her all the time, he is also using her as an object when he has to, because he knows that she's not the real Mal. So do me a favor, Mal, here, hold this rope for me, even though he can't trust her. But then he willingly gives his life to her. Which is another way of saying that this guy is so into his own obsession that he is willing to risk it. You know, it's like,
well, I call it, that's my theory, is codependence, I guess.
Yeah, and in fact, I kind of wonder, but remember there's the scene where they go into this, what looks like an opium den, because Yusuf is he's a sedatist, I think it called him. He creates sedatives for people to be able to like sleep for long times without being jerked awake, and literally living in the limbo world for as long as they can.
I think it was his employee who slapped the guy and everything. I think I'll check, but I think he said that that's the only way they could dream now.
Right, exactly.
That's the same thing that Dominic says.
Do you dream anymore in real life? Yeah. Do you dream?
Uses that thing every night because that's the only way you could dream. You know?
Right. So, but you see, now that's the thing about it. It basically says that when people are given a chance to live vicariously outside of reality and in the dream state, dude, I would be so much into that. I would literally give up everything in order to like live out every fantasy that I could possibly imagine. Unfortunately, it's symbolic of addiction because it was an opium den, which means that people will live, die, and have overdoses, which is essentially also what happens.
Yeah.
Now, in the conclusion of the movie, the cop character, when he tells the Mal character, "You're not good enough for me anymore," and he kind of like finally like deals with his addiction.
Well, he basically makes an official final declaration that you're not real.
Yeah,
and she doesn't take that well.
but you see, that's the only part of the movie that I think for me rings false. Because no way can he make, you know, yes, I understand that he's in a dire state where he has to finally confront what he has been trying to not confront all this time.
Yeah.
But when he finally does it, he does it so nonchalantly and so courageously that it's like, what? I
didn't think that was nonchalant.
Really?
Like because I think it was okay. I know there was a part that we're holding hands.
Yeah.
Oh no. Yes, it was. He was holding hands with her. He tells Ariadne, go grab.
Yeah, grab Saito and go wake up.
Yes. So while she's untying him, he slowly backs away from her, practically in tears, and she's in tears, I believe. Mal is in tears, I believe, or whatever it is. She's upset because he finally says, "You're very good, but you're not real." That's an intense scene. You didn't see any emotions?
I saw some, but remember that then she picks up a knife to stab him, and that's when Ariana shoots her. Yes. So it sort of became the whole Fatal Attraction thing. Remember when Glenn Cole's character finally gets shot by the wife.
Yes.
I mean, that's why I think that it fell a little.
I don't know. That's an intense face to me, man. You know.
But you see, here's the thing about Christopher Nolan. Well, let me put it to you like this: if this movie were to have been made by James Cameron, do you think James Cameron would have made this scene more of an emotional kind of like because remember when he did the movie The Abyss?
Yes.
There was like some emotion in that movie. Christopher Nolan, unfortunately, is not an emotional director.
You don't think so?
I don't think so, dude. Okay. He's an emotional director by the time that he got to Interstellar. But even then, he let the actors do the performing. Here in this case, if he would have let the scene go longer, and he would have, I probably would have seen more of a raw courage come out that would have made me think differently of the scene. But it was so hurried, and so many things were falling apart, and there was like so much shit going on that when this finally happened, I said like, it's not as believable as the building breaking apart and exploding. It's not as believable as the elevator crashing on the ground. I don't know why, but the actual emotion of the movie rang false to me.
That's amazing, because I must respectfully disagree, because not only is everything exploding into that scene, like I think Eames uses the defibrillator on Robert, and that shakes their entire limbo. The building falls apart. Yeah, and his arc ends here. You know. Yeah, it's intense, and he's looking at a false representation of his wife that he finally has to address. That as difficult as it is, you know, because this whole thing was created to keep her. You know?
Which by the way,
so I don't know. To me, it's fantastic.
Which by the way, I wanted to ask you. Who is the villain in this movie? Because I'm about to tell you who the villain in the movie is.
Let's see. Well, if you're, I almost had to remind myself of this. Is that they're doing this entire operation to convince a guy to destroy his father's
company, right? To break it apart so it's not a big conglomerate. Yeah.
To make it even more poetic, it's his father's not legacy, and it's his father's lifetime work. So they're convincing this guy covertly to destroy all of that, probably damaging his inheritance, like you mentioned. You know, so on one sense, they're the villain. You know. Yeah. And then Robert is definitely not a villain. His father probably was, in a sense of how cold he was, and what he said to Robert when his mom died. You know, Browning is manufactured to be a villain. He's not a real villain. You know. So Saito, definitely. You know, yeah.
Now that's the thing about Saito. He literally was what I thought was the villain, but he became the guy that was part of the caper. You know, he was like, you know, I'm going in with you guys. Yeah. And I hardly ever really saw a lot of people working around him. I saw a couple of goons, but he never really had like somebody else around. Right. He always seemed to do everything like. I've already bought the airline, so it seemed more convenient and stuff like that. So it was like a big.
The only assistance of the guy who grabbed Nash at the beginning.
Remember that at the start of the movie, the whole MacGuffin turned into the corporate espionage, and that turned into the MacGuffin, which means that people weren't really thinking about it throughout the whole movie until they had to think about it. Yeah. The villain of the movie was Maul herself. She always showed up at the wrong time. She always fucked up everything. Yeah. And then at some point or another, she was the thing that had to be dealt with in order to conclude the whole thing, right?
Monkey wrench.
Right. Yeah. Now, ironically, you know what Maul means in Spanish?
What does it mean?
Bad.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, mal. No.
Oh, yeah, French too.
Yeah,
French
really,
too.
right.
Yeah, so that might hopefully that would be great if it was done on purpose, But you see, we may be reading too much into it. But if that's the reason behind it, that's fantastic.
But you see, this is the reason why I think I think this is a lot like a James Bond movie, because in every James Bond movie, they just get rid of the villain quickly, just to get the movie finished. And so in this one, when they finally shoot,
final act,
yeah. And so in this one, when they shoot her, and she finally dies. That's the last you see of her. Yeah. you know, it's like, okay, get on with the movie. We killed her. She's done. Okay, now concluded.
I do think I don't think it's a kind of a throwaway effect, because it is part of the whole crescendo at the end. So So I do think it's part of the I mean, it's part of his arc, and everything, so. But okay, anyway. Okay, explain if you would like to the symbolism of never showing the kid's face until the end.
Mm-hmm. Now, I think that the reason why that happens is because it's gonna win the Leo DiCaprio over. He has it in his head that when he's with his children, he knows he's with his children.
Yeah.
But if he starts to experience his children in a dream, well, then that's what's going to keep him in the dream. He's never want to go back. I kind of wonder maybe if the reason why the Maul character never wanted to go back into reality was because she just loved the fact that she got to live out every fantasy with her family, her children, in the dream state.
Yeah.
And reality is unfortunately horrible, if you think about it. I mean, who wants to go and change a diaper when you don't ever have to change a diaper and keep your kid nice and clean all the time in a dream world? And it's getting to the point where I suddenly realized that I understand why nobody would want to wake up ever again.
Well, I think the only time the children was seen as a negative aspect was when she thought they were projections.
Yes, exactly.
I don't think she ever...
There's a moment where he is in the memory and she tells him, look, our children right there, and she calls them, and he says, no! And he turns away because he doesn't want to look at their faces, because he knows the minute they'll turn around, he's going to be won over, and he's not going back.
I think you're looking at two scenes. There's a scene where okay, so she's like, those kids are just projections.
Exactly.
You don't know what you're dreaming. And then I forgot what his response to that is. But anyway, oh, that's right. He says something. And she goes, "It's because you don't know you're dreaming."
Right.
And then at the end, when she's trying to tell him, when they're in limbo, when she's trying to tell him this is real, and she goes, I'll prove it to you. Let me get the kids, and they're about to turn, and then he turns away, so he doesn't have to look at him. So there, I think the facing of the kids in a dream might represent too much truth for him, which is why you looked away. But at the end, you get to see
their faces, right? And which is another way of saying that Well, actually, there was an explanation by Michael Caine, who said that whenever he's in a scene with Leonardo DiCaprio, that's reality.
Yeah.
And in the conclusion of the movie, you also see that he's not wearing his wedding ring. We're talking about Leo DiCaprio. He's not wearing his wedding ring. He never wears his wedding ring in the real world.
Okay.
It's only in the dream state that you see him wearing a wedding ring. So in the conclusion of the movie, you don't see a wedding ring.
Yeah.
So he's in the real world. But the point of the matter is that this is actually an ending in which this guy... Well, now here's the crazy part. Here's something that I should mention to you. You know that he literally is maybe 6 months from Maul have just died.
Okay.
Even though he has... He is in Europe or in another country outside of the U.S. because he can't go back to the U.S. because if he goes there, they're going to accuse him of killing her, right? And that's why Saito is telling him, I can fix all of that, but you got to do this for me, which is another perfect caper, Hi. So then what happens is that the Leonardo DiCaprio, I forget where I was going with this. What was I going with this?
It's about the kids.
No, it wasn't about the kids. It was about
Maul.
Maul. Shit, I completely blanked out.
Okay. This is just my own thing. Out of the millions of movies I've ever seen, the scene where all of the materials are exploding around Cobb and Ariadne is just fantastic. It's the only other scene, in the history of special effects that matches at least my interest with it. Is there's this? I don't know if you've seen Tomorrowland.
Is that the one with George Clooney?
Yeah.
Oh, that was directed by Brad Bird. Yeah, very underrated movie. Beautifully made, but unfortunately not very appealing to a lot of people.
I hate to agree with it, but it is viable criticism is that it falls apart at the end. But the scene is basically where let me turn off the sound. Yeah, basically where they go into back in time. This is a rocket that fires off the Eiffel Tower splits open.
Oh, sweet, yeah.
And I love this scene. This is just I'll do it real quick. So there you go. Like, this is in Paris, obviously. So he initiates a bunch of mechanisms that nobody know about, and it initiates this rocket, and they basically fly around the moon and come back around. This whole scenery is just absolutely beautiful. Look at all this, man. But anyway, and then it comes back down to Earth, and the parachute coming out here is pretty cool too. Yeah, this whole thing is just...
Oh, yeah.
That's fantastic. This movie, we'll be here all day. But anyway, so those two scenes are like my all-time favorites for special effects and everything. So, okay. Speaking of another real quick thing about special effects is, I love the visual, the visionary he is, like perhaps like Del Toro and Zemeckis, because Death Becomes Her, the special effects in that was just, it's like you've never seen anything like that before. And I guess Beowulf and the Polar Express, I mean, they're pretty cool, but those movies, for some reason, not only they didn't do well, but they didn't resonate too well with me. But Death Becomes Her, man, fantastic.
Yeah, it's kind of weird, but Robert Zemeckis was the guy who just decided when he made the movie Polar Express and Beowulf and he also did Disney's. He also did Disney's Christmas Carol.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And they were all computer generated. Yeah. These were all filmed in the volume. Everybody had to wear motion capture, motion suits and stuff like that.
The original avatars, basically. Yeah.
Right, yeah. But Robert Zemeckis had the distinction of making computer generated movies in which the people were. They tried very hard to make him look like humans, but they didn't really look human-like. They moved human-like, but they really didn't have... It was the thing where it looked real, but it felt fake.
The issue, because I watched Polar Express a long time ago, and the thing that gives away computer manufacturing very often is the eyes. The eyes look odd.
Yeah, there was something about that movie that it just... they look creepy.
Okay, this is something that a couple things here I picked up because of my rewatching the movie. The only reason Mal was able to find Robert in the snow level is because Cobb asked Ariadne for the layout of that whole place, and she's like, well, you told me not to do that, and he's like, hey, we ain't got time for this.
Exactly.
So he asked her for the information, and one thing, something else that I caught was that Cobb tells Ariadne, tell Saito about the extra entrance to the compound, because they can't use a regular way because there's too many guys there, too many projections. So in a half second, you hear Ariadne come into a radio that Saito has, and she goes, Saito, are you there? And he goes, okay. And it just, I don't know if you caught it, but that's when she told him about the entrance.
Exactly.
I didn't catch that before. So.
Now remember that the only reason also I think that wasn't the Cobb. He could shoot.
He was shooting
Maul,
projections.
right? Right, exactly.
Yeah.
He was gonna shoot a gun and shoot at Maul. Remember?
Well, he shot the projections, and then Maul shows up out of nowhere.
Right,
now,
exactly.
One of my grievances is you are introduced to the pattern of Cobb losing it. He sees his kids, he sees the curtains and all that stuff. That those are snippets of him losing the ability to know that he's dreaming.
Exactly.
And it just didn't feel the same way that you have a problem with a lack of emotions at the crescendo of the movie. It seemed forced to me when he saw Mal showing up behind Robert, and Ariadne's like, she's not real, and he says, how do you know that? It just seemed a little forced. In spite of the fact that he was losing control, it seemed a little forced that he would lose it there. I don't know.
No, you know what? But sometimes you kind of have to imagine yourself as the screenwriter. You have to imagine yourself as the director, and sometimes, to get to point A to get to point B. And I've noticed this when I watch the movie, is that the movie gets explained to you, but it gets explained with such minute details in quick dialogue form that it gets explained right away to the point where you didn't pick it up.
Yeah.
And
That's true. That's definitely true.
Right, but you see, that's one of those things where it's the filmmaker, and I think the screenwriter, once again, the same guy, Christopher Nolan, basically saying, look, I just need to get to this point. So here, I'll explain it here, and let me get to this action.
Yeah, you got to pay attention.
But but the other thing is that's very difficult because, you know that as a visual artist, you have to convey what you want the audience to see in so many panels. And for him, he had to show what he wanted to show in so many ways. And he had it in his head in such a way that he says, look, I trust you that you'll get it. I just have got to show it to you like this. Which is another way of saying that he could have missed or hit, but he took a gamble. Yeah. And he pretty much says, look, I'm hoping you guys will get it.
Yeah.
I hope that you will pick up on what I'm trying to say here.
I'd love to know how Tenet would have done if it was released now or before COVID.
Oh, yeah.
Because COVID is definitely I don't want to use the word excuse, but it is, a barrier to how well the movie is. Because of how insanely complex it is, I would have loved to know how the audience would have accepted. Because there are people who, like, unfortunately, are calling it the worst Christopher Nolan movie. But I think there are people who actually are calling it a failure, and they're not even taking COVID into account, which is ridiculous. Because even in China, they made a lot of money. Okay, so next point is, this is something that you tell me if you caught this, because I only know this because of the fandom site. Arthur is his position in the operation, and in all of the operation he worked with Cobb. He is titled as the Dreamer, and the Dreamer. Okay, so this is what I wrote here. Because his mind is so organized and stable, Arthur is often used as a dreamer for secondary dream levels. Arthur is very knowledgeable about the technical aspects of the world of the dream and is readily able to explain it to others in very simple terms. So I had no idea that he was like, he had such a kind of maneuvering type of purpose. And the similarity that I see to him would be like, there's always in a lot of these movies, there's always like in the movie Dread, the computer guy, like he seemed autistic a little bit. Like I could see him as a kind of computer geeky guy.
Right.
I guess that's the equivalent of it. Because in Dread, that guy did seem on the spectrum, if that's the correct term to use.
He totally played him very, very serious. Not much. He does have a little bit of a sense of humor. He actually is the one that connects more with the audience, in my opinion.
Well, he calmed Ariadne to kiss him.
Right, exactly.
Funny, yeah.
But he comes off so much to me as like, if in reality, like outside of work, he would come across too much of a douchebag, like someone that I would not get along with. But that's because, he's the type of guy that, like, if he were a lawyer, it would always be about the law and about winning the case.
Well, he's the Scully, as far as it's the X-Files. There's this Fox and he's like this.
You're absolutely right.
More logic.
Exactly.
Yeah.
She's the one that like says, "Well, how can I believe something that I don't see in front of my eyes?"
Yeah. Even when I see it.
Yes, even when I see it. Right. Exactly.
She did see it a couple times. Yeah. Okay. So I thought it was kind of cool that the scene where, because Cobb presents his set of lessons, and then Mal attacks her,
Exactly.
And then her second set of lessons after, I think this was after she returns, because she left, of course, after she returns. So then it's Arthur's time to teach her about the rules and everything. That was right out of the Matrix, man.
Yes.
Yeah.
In fact, it's kind of weird, but it's a perfect way of presenting the script. You present, you have them literally waking up in the middle of a dream, which is remember they mentioned that, like, have you ever started a dream at the beginning? No, you're always at the middle, right? Yeah. In the middle of it. Right. And so the same thing happened with the movie Opened. We were in the middle of a dream, and we had to then follow the leads telling each other what we were expecting, so that when it finally happened again, we accepted it because we got to accept it before.
Yeah.
You know, so the script literally did its job.
Yeah.
It's a brilliant script.
Yeah.
Oh, and that's what I want to tell you about. There is always something that Christopher Nolan has done throughout all of his movies. He plays with time.
Okay.
Time is relative. Remember in the movie Interstellar?
Yeah.
The astronauts go to a planet. They're only there for like 10 minutes, but 27 minutes have gone by.
I can't think of the black guy's name, but was it 8 years? Something insane. Like
no, he actually waited 26 years. When they returned
God.
to the planet, he had been waiting for them for 26
That's
years.
Unreal.
I know, it's heartbreaking if you think about it.
He would go mad.
Oh yeah, but you know,
he would look like Andy Garcia at the end of Passenger has this huge beard. And
Wow.
And then I think they kind of made Lawrence Fishburne look a little rugged too, you know. So it's like, you know, you would have you would go insane too.
In the Christopher Nolan movie Dunkirk, you never really realized that the movie is actually told in
There's
different
time
shifts,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
The movie Memento, which is the first movie that he actually produced, I think, for a studio.
Yeah.
It was a movie that was
Going
told
backwards.
in reverse.
Yeah.
He does this with Inception,
Yeah.
because dream is about losing time. You just are never aware of how long you've been in a dream.
It is in one of these strategic meetings that they start going into the different layer of times, and Eames was like, "Listen, I'm not good with math here. You want to tell me that in English?"
Right, exactly. I remember.
So,
Which is another thing. The Eames character is he's the forger.
okay.
He's the one that literally can like shapeshift in a dream.
Where was I? Maybe we'll come across it, but there was a problem. Okay, there it is. Okay, I thought it was way too convenient that in the second layer, when they're in that hotel or whatever, when Browning comes walking and Saito like looks at him and says,
Hey, you changed your appearance.
"Yeah," and then of course Eames is like, you know, kind of, you know.
Exactly. No.
I thought that, okay, because they did Eames predicted that his subconscious would generate Browning. It seemed a little too convenient that not only would Robert's subconscious generate his uncle, but generate his uncle to be duplicitous and be the one that orchestrated the fake kidnapping and all that stuff. I would have totally accepted it if that whole thing was Eames doing it.
Yeah,
You know, so it's too convenient for me.
and also it gets to the point where you start wondering, can you make while they're in the dream state, you can literally make that into a nightmare, which is why they have to be very, very careful not to fuck around with the guy who they are in the dream with, because they're in that person's right. Exactly, they're inside a subconscious, and you kind of like say that there has to be a bunch of rules and regulations that we can probably go over. But in order for us to actually like do this kind of existing, we have got to play fantasy and literally say, yeah, that's something that you couldn't do in a dream, could you?
Well, it's kind of like hypnotizing. You know?
Exactly.
I mean, like, unfortunately, it's on a show, so I have to question it. But this guy did there's no way in hell I'm gonna find this footage.
Exactly, right.
But there's this guy, like maybe it was 2020 or something, and he had somebody hypnotize him, and he was hypnotized into like because what they did was the person doing the hypnotism, or whatever the term is, he said, whatever math question I'm going to give you, you're going to give me the number 5 for every single question I give you. So they give him a bunch of cards. Like one was like 2 plus 3, 3 plus 3, 10 plus 10, and every time he looked at the card, he said 5, and then they only had the camera on him, but then in the middle of that, he stopped and he looked at his producer. He's like, "What are you laughing at?" Because he kept on, and the guy was like, "That was the whole portion of that show was how effective that stuff is, which is frightening."
Exactly.
You know, so this is what this is basically, is just done in a much more poetic and James Bondish manner.
And you know what? Let me also bring this up, but I completely forgot about this until now. Did you ever see a Japanimation movie called Paprika?
Of course.
Now, did you notice that there are a lot of similarities between that movie and Inception?
Absolutely, it's all dream, and it's just a hell of a lot more nightmarish.
Yes, extremely. But to the point
It
where
is such a beautiful movie, man.
how can something not influence another? I mean, I'm pretty sure that Christopher Nolan saw Paprika and says, "Oh, I can make something similar to that in my script." Okay, that's fine, but it gets kind of scary when you suddenly start seeing something that looks so familiar in an American version and not think, "Oh, he stole it from that."
Okay, the strategy to use a positive emotion to initiate their goal inside of Robert's mind instead of something negative I thought was very human and very intuitive. I thought that was very cool, especially with the father. I thought it was brilliant and stuff like that.
Yeah, there was like something great when the doors opened and he goes inside
The safe.
the safe, right? And the vault is literally just devoid of any emotion, because remember
it looked like the damn virtual room from Star Trek.
Right, exactly. It looked like the holodeck.
Yeah.
But what's ironic is that when you see the father, you see him surrounded by this very eclectic kind of design to his castle.
Yeah.
And it's very cold and not very and that's exactly how it's presented when it's told from the perspective of Robert when he goes inside the vault.
Yeah.
It's like, I've been looking for somebody who's emotional, and my father is not emotional, which is why I've just stepped into a cold room.
Yeah.
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 Very symbolic.
Yeah. So it's kind of hard to know where the limitations are in the sense that when Arthur was dealing with the projections, when they the second time they start firing at them when they were in a safe house, so he's trying to shoot back at them, and again, I think this time I'm not going to hold back on my criticism, because the editing there was weird. Like there was a guy on the roof.
Yeah.
Who like because when I grab screenshots for those scenes, I need to see gunfire from the projections, and I don't think there was any. You just saw them hold the gun. I mean, you saw saw fire. Like, okay, the screenshot I have is of sparks in front of Arthur.
Yeah.
And when Eames comes in with a bigger gun, it took me forever to find a screenshot of fire coming out of his gun, and there's barely anything there. But from the projections, I couldn't find one screenshots with them with a gunfire at all. But the point of that whole thing is, what limits you as far as the size of your artillery? Because Eames just came in with a bigger gun.
Right, he says, "Don't be afraid to dream bigger, love."
Yeah.
And it's true. I mean, essentially, if you're in this dream world, you could bring out a big gun and get rid of everybody and not worry about the consequences.
It's like the Matrix, where all these guns came out of nowhere.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's like remember that there's a moment where the freight train comes out of nowhere, and it's like right there in the middle of the road, and it's going through. And it's like, that's a great, brilliant, visual to show that like anything can happen in the dream world.
Yeah.
But then not a lot happens other than the fact that it's a lot of shooting guns and stuff like that. So it becomes an action movie.
Yeah.
And once again, it's like getting to point A to get to point B.
Yeah.
So I know that the story has to get through, but sometimes I really wanted them to explore the dream world. I wanted them to.
Well, it's kind of like a competent version of the second Matrix.
Yes.
The second Matrix was like, get this and then get this and then get this.
Exactly.
And in the ending, it's like it took me 4 viewings to understand the ending, because the movie needs another 20 minutes, because the captain talks about the catastrophe that happened,
right,
and narrates it quickly.
Yes,
and you got to pay attention to that. But yeah, the Inception is like a competent version of the Matrix Reloaded.
But at the same time, I super understand some logic when it comes to actual dream studies, in which they say that when you are having a dream and you say that I dreamt I was in a spaceship and this and that and everything else, you have to understand that it's your subconscious. Literally, you are talking to your own subconscious when you're dreaming.
Yeah.
And you're experiencing something in your head. So you wonder, why was I on a spaceship? And the thing about it is that when you remember a dream where you're in a spaceship, remember, your brain actually created that spaceship.
Yeah.
But you were never inside that spaceship, but yet you distinctly remember how it looked, how it smelled, how it's, how.
Yeah.
And how can you explain to yourself that your brain had the capability of designing this incredible spaceship that you find yourself in, and you say, where did that come from? I've had dreams where I have imagined cities. I remember I had a dream where I was in some kind of like a school, like a university, and literally all of the way you got to every classroom was through ramps. Do you remember a long time ago there was a movie called Dreamscape with Dennis Quaid and Kate Capshaw?
I heard of it. I'm trying to think. Altered States is what comes to mind.
That's the movie you're thinking about. But Dreamscape was a movie where these people were like, it was like a thriller, but it was a terrible 1980s kind of like thriller movie. But they would like invade other people's dreams. So they
I'm surprised I haven't seen that yet.
It's got Christopher Plummer, Dennis Quaid. I know it's one of those movies that if you were to look at the poster or look at the screenshot, you'd be like, oh yes, I think I may have known about this movie, but you never saw it. Do you remember the conclusion of the movie Brainstorm that we were talking about a while ago? Remember, he finally looks at the video playback of her death.
He almost dies.
And essentially he sees that there is an afterlife. And that was kind of like, that to me, that was very prolific. I was like, wow. Yeah. Because it would be fantastic if there was proof of an afterlife. Yeah. It would just mean that life is worth it.
Yeah. When the van finally dove off the edge of the bridge, Arthur on his level lost gravity. Right. Started to fall. Now, technically, they should have lost gravity in the snow level. They got an avalanche. Now, is that just because if everybody there lost gravity, it would just screw up the whole story, basically?
I'm assuming that, but I also I remember that there's a portion in the movie where they're talking so fast and the action is so kind of convoluted because, Saito has been shot. They're also like talking to each other. They're now telling each other that if you go into limbo will just do this and this. They're just talking to each other and they're passing off the information. But they kind of like explain all of that.
Well, yeah, they describe the effects of, because they're on their sedative, if they go into limbo, they could cause brain damage.
Right. I'm kind of curious because Christopher Nolan must have, as a visual director, he must have said like, oh, it's going to look cool when we do this, and it's going to look cool when we do this, and it's going to look cool when we do this. But you see, if you start thinking that you should have lost gravity in the snow cap area, well then, visually you could say, oh, we could probably make the snow fall in slow motion and everybody has to run through the snow. It would be visually, it would be fantastic. Like, yeah, how much will that cost? Oh, that's an additional $40 billion. And essentially I'm thinking he must have thought, yeah, they should have lost gravity, but no,
it would not have worked.
Yeah, exactly, it would not have worked. So he just, like I said, went on with it.
Yeah.
But you see, he's won you over somehow because he says, hey, I'm giving you that and then I'm giving you this. So enjoy what I gave you, and then enjoy what comes next.
Yeah.
And you surrender as an audience member.
Yeah.
And you enjoy it, and you have a great time, and you compare it to James Bond films and the music and all that. Yeah. And all you can think about is like, because seriously, Christopher Nolan made this movie, and he grabbed onto you, and he didn't let go. And as soon as he did let go, he asked you, "Did you like it?" And you had no choice but to say, yes.
Well, he leaves you with a good hook at the end, man. The spinner's just still spinning, And I remember like at the end of the movie, people were like, it was kind of I don't know if it was a gasp, but there was a reaction because the spinner was still spinning.
I know, right?
That was great. I mean, that is just masterful filmmaking.
Yeah. And also, do you have an opinion about the music? Because the music is without a doubt brilliant.
I do. It is. One of the difficulties of doing these videos is the underground music when we're talking, and because I now know that I can't use anything by Hans Zimmer because YouTube, the algorithm picks it up and
it's copyrighted, right?
Which sucks because the first cut I did of Man of Steel, I put the soundtrack in there. It was fucking beautiful. But
of course.
The algorithm was like, nope, shit.
Mm-hmm.
I have the soundtrack here, and it's definitely really cool. And his best work, in my opinion, is Man of Steel and Interstellar.
Interstellar, without a doubt, is amazing. The Dune, one movie.
Dune is harsh and I cannot listen to it unless I'm watching a movie.
Yeah, it wasn't. I didn't find Dune to be very relatable, which is kind of weird because I found Inception soundtrack to be very relatable, but only because it sounded a lot more like a James Bond than it did anything else.
Okay.
So it placed me in that mindset. I think Hans Zimmer has the ability to say, I think I know the audience that you're playing for, Christopher, when he's talking to Christopher. And I think that in order for me to also win them over for you, is that I've got to give them a score that is going to remind them of the stuff that they used to watch when they watched the James Bond.
Yeah.
And so when he did this for this movie, I was mesmerized because it brought me home. It put me on a comfort level.
It's very relaxing and dreamlike.
It's the same way
I think even the intense scenes are like that.
Which is weird because he did the soundtrack for Blade Runner 2049.
Yeah.
And compared to the original Vangelis score from the original Blade Runner from 1982, it's almost as if Hans Zimmer is saying, I try to be like Vangelis, but I couldn't do it.
Well, there are parts of that soundtrack that either borrow stuff from it or reproduce it.
Right, exactly.
Which is great. And the other part of that, because it's one of those soundtracks I can listen to also just whenever.
It's great.
It's fantastic because I think, for example, the very first scene after killing Sapper Morton, he's flying towards the headquarters,
the city, right?
I think it's that scene. I'm not sure, but there's a machine-like sound that's fantastic. You're like, is that the engine of his vehicle, or is that the music? Because I think the first time I heard a soundtrack actually use sounds was Prometheus, but Hans Zimmer does this with Blade Runner.
Plus the soundtrack gets faster and faster as it goes along. Like if there's a chase scene, the tempo goes. So literally, it flourishes you with so much tension. The music does that you sort of want to keep up with the music. You want to keep up with the movie. You want to keep up with the characters. You want to keep up with the dialogue. Yeah. And seriously, the one thing that sort of keeps it all in place is the music. Mm-hmm. Amazing, but Hans Zimmer is literally the the co-owner of this movie.
All right, so
actually, here's where I get lost. Okay, so the first time they go into the dream share, at the conclusion of the movie, they go into the subconscious of Robert, right? Of Brownie.
Okay. So you're talking about when they were in the hotel and then they go to the...
Right, exactly. So remember, it starts off with them in a rain, outside in the rain. And they're inside the subconscious of who now in that one?
Robert. It's always been Robert.
It's Robert, okay. So the next time they jump into the next level, it's also Robert, or it's
always been Robert, but what they did with from the hotel to the snow level, they told... Cobb tells Robert that... so Robert says that I orchestrated the kidnapping and everything because I want access to the additional, more powerful will from Maurice that is made to destroy the company.
Right.
So I did all this to get the numbers to open the safe to get to that document. Cobb lies. It tells Robert
that's right. That's
Robert
right.
is lying, and so we have to go into his mind.
He tells him that yes, but they're in fact going into the other guy. Yeah. Right, now I remember.
Yeah, so in fact they're going deeper into Robert's mind.
Yeah, they're going deeper.
They're conning him into not only telling him they're going to Robert's mind, but in doing so, they're having Robert part of their operation.
Exactly.
So it's
which is
such
kind
a
of
chess
weird
game.
because he literally like joins in on the heist. Right, exactly, and he doesn't think anything of it.
Yeah.
But that's because he's in a dream.
Yeah.
It's like he has no reason to question anybody, right?
That brings in another point. It's like, okay, so two things. Now, when he wakes up from this whole thing, because they were telling him, Cobb was telling him in the second level that he is being sedated and they're trying to do an extraction on him. So that the Cobb tells him that's what's happening. And so when he wakes up, he should believe that there are people trying to extract information from him. So,
Exactly.
So, according to the narrative, he should wake up and wonder, where the hell are my captives? But, so that's one thing. Yeah, so shout out to Pete Postlethwaite, because at least, I don't know everything he did before dying, unfortunately, but he did. I remember him from this movie and The Town.
Right, I remember he was in The Town.
Yeah.
The ironic thing is that it's a big cast. It's a all-star cast. And I completely forgot that Tom Berenger was in this movie.
Oh, yeah. Because Christopher Nolan does this at times with his casting, because there is a somewhat olderish actor in Tenet. The guy that Mr. Washington, I can't remember his first name, but the main protagonist, when he wakes up after getting his mouth reconstructed,
right?
The guy, the government agent guy there, that's a vintage actor too.
Oh yeah, he's like a well-known character actor from Canada, I think.
Yeah. In spite of the fact that when they got out, when the kick grabbed everybody out and brought them all into the first level, and they were swimming out of the van.
Right.
Saito and Cobb should have awakened at the exact same time, because it's all relative.
Right, exactly. They all have to experience the same kick.
They should have been drowning.
And the kick should have been simultaneous, and which is why they had to race to do all this stuff, you know. But unfortunately, because Saito had died in the third level and was now in limbo, and Cobb...
Or understand that, but relative to time, everybody should have woken up.
Everybody should have woken up.
I guess for the plot convenience,
Now, here's the thing about it. When they do wake up in the airplane at the conclusion of the movie and they're looking around, I kind of like the reaction that they have, because...
it's like they all had some experience.
Right.
Yeah.
Not only that, but Cobb and Saito, they kind of look at each other and they have this look in their face like, I just lived 60 years.
Yeah,
the fuck?
Yeah.
And now I'm in an airplane?
Yeah.
It's
like... If you allow it, you feel something in that scene.
Now, can you actually imagine, like, going to sleep, and while you're asleep, you live an entirely different life, and you wake up and you can actually, like, go back and forth? I mean, that would be an incredible kind of ability to do.
Yeah.
But you are literally living two lives at the same time.
Yeah, it's like the Next Generation episode with
Inner Light with Patrick Stewart.
That is such a beautiful, like, human episode, man.
And you see that
the Star Trek these days, they can't even come close to doing that.
That particular episode of Inner Light, the Next Generation episode, like, you see him and he literally is like saying, I can't believe that this is my life again, because I just lived another life.
Well, because at the end, that wife shows up.
I know, exactly. It's heartbreaking.
Okay, have you ever had a dream where you were actually aware that you were dreaming?
Oh yeah, in fact, I illustrated it. I'm going to send you the illustrations, because I remember specifically getting up in the middle of the night after I had this dream, and it was very upsetting, and I kind of like just walked up and down the house, and I remember that the next day I just decided to, like, draw it, and I drew it in, like, this little book that I had. And in this dream, it was exactly what happens almost in Inception.
Oh, really?
So this is what happens. I go inside a Starbucks, and I ask them if I can just have a cup so that I can just put the money in the cup, right?
Okay.
I get into an argument with a woman, right?
Okay.
And the woman throws her drink at me. And so I run out of the restaurant after she throws her drink at me. And so as I'm walking, a taxi is following me. And there are creatures inside the taxi. And one of the creatures comes out, and imagine a wolf.
Okay.
Walking like if he was a man. And it started to talk to me, asking me if I needed a ride. And I looked at him, and I said to myself, no, because you're a monster. And I looked inside the cab, and there were eyes inside the cab, which meant that there were more monsters inside the cab.
Wait for you.
All of a sudden, I'm walking away, and they're still following me. And that's when a giant lid above the sky starts to close in on
Also
him.
Inception.
And so I look, and I'm looking at the sky, and behind me are these monsters, and I'm looking, and the thing just closes, and the thing just goes black.
Wow.
I wake up, and I literally am going, what the fuck is that about?
That's great. With those eyes so freaky, man.
I'm not joking. I will send you the illustrations as soon as I get home.
Well, let's see. For me, I fully was aware I was dreaming, and I manipulated the dream. I mean, people disappeared and everything, and then eventually I fell back asleep. I was playing poker with some people, and then maybe 3 weeks ago, I didn't necessarily realize I was dreaming, but what happened was I was in a house being chased by a creature, and for some reason eventually I said fuck it, and I went into a room and I yelled out at the creature. I'm like, come in, let's go at it.
Yeah.
Then I was ready. Whatever it was, I was ready to challenge it, and then that was it. But that was fun. I like when, because in many dreams I'm escaping something.
Yeah.
Anytime I'm confronting something, when I wake up from that, I feel jazzed up, man. Two more things. One thing that was kind of cool. Like I went to see Inception with a couple friends, and when he saw the buildings here, my artwork came into his mind, which is kind of cool here, you know. So this was such a great. I would love to know what's practical here and what's computer generated.
Well,
that's unbelievable.
It's kind of amazing, but remember, there is a shot in the movie, and by the way, the movie is filled with like insert shots, like hundreds of them. Like they mention something, like they mentioned we built this city, we built our own city, the one we've always wanted to build, and then they just show them like building sandcastles in the beach, and then when you see them going into this landscape, and you see that all those buildings are actually made out of sand, you start realizing, oh wow, this was their city. They built all of this, but it's falling apart. Right?
Oh, yeah, it's falling apart. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just one of those things where, like, oh yeah, you could do this in a dream, and this stuff is possible. Which is another way of saying that Christopher Nolan never showed you something that you found unbelievable. You always found something that was believable.
It's grounded.
Yeah, it's very grounded. Even to the point where, remember, they talk about the homes. They say that's our first apartment. Yeah. This is where she grew up.
Yeah.
And the homes are in the middle of this huge city. Of course, it's like you've treating your homes as museum pieces now.
Yeah. Well, it's a little reminiscent. I think Metropolis was the first time this was done, which is the small house in the middle of like this Metropolis, because they brought that into Up, I think.
Yeah, and they did that almost with
Catwoman of all places.
They did, in Catwoman, I think I remember something similar to that in Batman, but I can't really right away recall. But I remember that in Batman they would have a little house and then big buildings around.
Yeah, maybe it might be in one of the Tim Burton movies.
Yeah, the Tim Burton movies,
especially the second one, because he said he used Metropolis as an influence,
right?
All right, cool. So our final grade, like from 0 to 10.
Well, from 0 to 10, I definitely will give Inception flat out, without a doubt, 10.
10, okay.
To the point where I will have to say that if there were like film students out there who would have to say, like, there was a movie that came out that just knocked me out, influenced the way that I watch movies from there on, I think Inception would be one of those movies.
Yeah.
The same way that 2001 was for people, same way that Star Wars was for some other people.
Yeah. Okay, so my, I want to give it a 10, but I guess I'll give it 9.5.
I would understand your 9.5.
I think it's only because of the small limitations that I've mentioned. But it's 9.5, like 9.9 practically, basically.
I would have given it a 9.5, mainly because of the fact that I think that there are a lot of editing mishaps.
Okay, yeah.
But truth be told, it's forgivable because, like I just said, not all movies are perfect. They have to have a flaw, and if they are perfect, they have no business being in life.
I can't remember who said this. The guy had a term for it, which was... I'll have to look it up. This guy that no longer does videos, and I don't know why, because he put Prometheus on trial, and it was the most amazing video.
Really?
And he took a big shit on Damon Lindelof and everything.
Wow.
It was great. And I forgot what he called it, but he had a term for being able to forgive limitations in a plot if everything else in the movie is fantastic. You know,
Wow.
all of the problems are forgivable because it's a good movie.
If he has a term, I would love to know
Yeah,
what that term
I'll
is.
look it up. If I can find a video, I'll put it in the captions and everything and stuff. So, all right, cool. So, thanks for watching the video, and thanks to Art for being here. And I believe the next video will be the Battle of the Super Sons that I'm doing with Will.
Is that the one with Superman and Batman's sons?
Yeah, so
it's an animated feature.
It's it's computer generated. It's Superman's biological son, and I think Batman's adopted son. Yeah.
Is the one that he had with the daughter of Ra's al Ghul?
That I don't know.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I know. There's Damien, I think, is what they call him in the comic books. But
okay, cool. So thanks for watching the video, and I'll see you in the next one.